Kevin Mako founded Mako Design, a product development firm specifically catering to hardware startups. He had an unconventional journey to success, turning what started as an idea he had while in high school into a thriving business. Kevin details the challenges of establishing a new niche market that defied industry norms and how he pioneered a new category of design and manufacturing for new startups. Kevin emphasized the importance of grit and determination as he recalled stories from his journey, how he had to persevere through numerous financial challenges and industry doubters on the way to growing Mako Design from a small startup to an industry leader, winning numerous awards and now operating 4 locations. So whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting your journey, get ready for some inspiring insights from Kevin's story. Also, if you got value from this content, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Here's my conversation with Kevin Mako. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fulfillment Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulas, and this week, my guest is the founder and CEO of Mako Design, Kevin Mako. Welcome, Kevin.
David, really excited to be on the show. I love the show, and I appreciate what you're doing, bringing all this to the attention of your audience. So thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to talking today about product development and hardware startups and my journey as well as a product development firm.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here. Can you tell us what Mako Design is and the backstory behind it?
Yeah, sure. The Coles notes of what we do is we do product development for hardware startups. So these are inventions, gadgets, physical ideas, all in the consumer product space. So this is stuff that's going to Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Amazon, or the retail stores or wholesale distribution or whatever you name it, talking about consumer products and the gap between that sketch on a napkin through to manufacturing. We are kind of that middle gap of design engineering, prototyping, and getting to production.
Okay. And you came up with the idea for this company when you're in high school? Is that right?
Yeah, 1999, which is a few years ago now. So it was an idea that was built out of necessity, which I imagine so many of your listeners on the show are in that zone where they're trying to get something done. And in my case, I was trying to get a product manufactured. That's it. I said, okay, looking around, trying to figure out what exists to help me get my product to production. I just needed units. I had a great idea and I needed units sitting in my garage for all I cared that I wanted to go and sell. And I couldn't find anything. So that was high school. That was in 1999. So I started toying around with the idea. Well, what if I became that avenue and helped other people with ideas do the design and engineering and get it to production? So as I went into university, I started building this more and more to the point where I actually incorporated halfway through school and this was my hobby. So I was at a high performance school. I was class president. It was a tough academic gig. And on the side, I was also trying to build this business with this concept that I had to the point where when I graduated in 2007, I turned down really good job offers, despite being $50,000 in student debt. I turned down those job offers to say, you know what, I've got to try this thing and I'm probably going to fail, but let me just jump into this and continue now full time at what I was doing and see if I can take a run at this. And well, here we are, 2024, we're still around.
Yeah, wow. And that's inspiring too, right? Because so many people have these entrepreneurial ambitions, right? And these dreams, and like they feel it in their gut, like I should just go for it. But the practical mind and circumstances so many times get in the way. Like what was it like making that decision when you're like, I have this debt and I went to school to, many people go to find a career and you're getting job offers that would help you get out of debt. What was that decision like when you just said, well, I'm just going to go for my dream here?
You know what? I don't know if I recommend it. Hindsight is 2020, and I don't necessarily suggest following my path, or I'm still not sure. Let's put it that way, because I took the mentality of complete all or nothing. I was either going to make this work or I was going to go bankrupt. And I was in my early 20s. So many of my mentors at the time said, well, what do you have to lose? And I took that to heart. I was at a point in my life where I really said, yeah, what is the worst? I'll go bankrupt, which people think is a terrible thing. And, in many ways it can be. But as a young lad, to me, the downside really didn't look that bad. I'm going to go bankrupt and then I'm going to go begging for those jobs again. And hopefully I'll get one of those jobs and I'll pick my life back up again and continue and try another day. So it was really an all or nothing approach, especially because I was in so much debt already from student debt through school. And I was operating on maybe 6 weeks cash flow at a time. So if I didn't land that next customer, I was toast. And that was daunting because, on one hand, but also really motivational on the other side. You've got to find customers and you've got to find customers who are willing to pay for this model. So we started with really simple products. I had a part-time industrial designer working out of my condo at the time. And we would just take on extremely simple things like golf tee and other simple products that are now you can buy all over the place. But in any case, the idea was we'll take a simple product, we'll do all the design and engineering, connect it with manufacturing overseas or locally, and get that client off the ground. One after another after another. The difficult thing with this type of model, still to today, with no investors, no debt, still to today, all of that required that anytime I wanted to grow, I essentially had to risk it all. So my entire 20s was basically spent growing the business a little bit until I was comfortable, taking that comfort margin, reinvesting it back into the business, nearly going broke again, over and over and over again, until as I rolled into my 30s and got into family life and all that sort of stuff and a mortgage, the business was big enough that I don't need to take those type of risks anymore. But I'll never forget those series of near misses or near bankruptcies that continue to push the business to where it is today.
How important do you think those experiences were, where, like you said, you were willing to risk it all very early on, and you had so many close calls, but yet you dug deep, you pulled through, you found a way, you kept the business afloat. Now, how important do you think that experience is to your success?
Well, I went to the top business school in the country and I learned a lot there. And then I went and I studied overseas at Hong Kong University for supply chain management. I learned a lot there and met a bunch of, like, the purpose there is to meet a bunch of the manufacturing suppliers and so on. And I can tell you, I learned 20 or 30% of my stuff at ultra high performance school. And the vast majority, the rest of it was learned through the school of hard knocks. And when you push yourself into that arena, you are forced to become very sharp, especially when you don't have investors or debt to rely on. There's no cushion. So it's all on your shoulders, everything. And as you add more and more staff and team members, it's not just you anymore. It's their lives and their mortgages, their families that are relying on you. So early in life, when you have that kind of pressure, although I feel that you could learn this at any age, and I see it because we deal with countless. I've probably dealt with almost 2,000 hardware startups at this point in time. So I see it. At any age, you can learn this type of grit and ability to sharpen the pencil and really to be great at your craft, whatever you're doing in the world. You can learn those things at any age. But the younger that you start or the earlier that you start, the exponentially more you're going to learn over the subsequent years. As long as you're sticking to that goal, you don't give up early, and you've got the grit and tenacity to stay with it no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned too, part of the reason that you felt compelled to do this is because there was no other companies like this that catered to hardware startups at the time you started. And knowing, seeing that too, because there's a reason many of these companies like focused on the larger customers and the Fortune 500 firms and whatnot. Like, how difficult was it putting all the pieces together to actually have a functional business that could cater to a startup?
Well, it's crazy. So as I was going through this journey, especially as I was graduating from university and going into the business full time for the first few months, I had good mentors that I had reached out to and found. I just kept, pushing and pushing until I could talk to them. And a lot of them were the owners of these big industrial design firms. Unanimously, they all told me, Kevin, look, great idea. It's a good idea for school that you want to help small businesses, startups, and inventors with their product ideas. But listen, from the industry, we avoid those people like the plague. You know, you use them in the early days to get a few projects under your belt and get some money in the door. And then, of course, you got to jump up to your big corporate Fortune 500 product company revolving monthly contracts. That's what we all do. And arguably still to today, 2024, the vast majority of industrial design houses, almost all of their business or all nearly, let's say 80+% of their business is typically large brands. And they essentially told me, you're destined to fail. You might be able to have, you know, 2 or 3 person design team, but there's no way you're going to survive dealing with inventors. And that was tough because also keep in mind, this is 2007. So the economy is tanking on one hand. I've now given up these great job opportunities, and my mentors who are in the industry are telling me it's a path and idea that's destined to fail. But I loved startups and I loved entrepreneurship. That was my goal. So my vision and my dream was to help that industry, that niche vertical. And now keep in mind, this is before Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all kinds of maker spaces and business accelerators, the WeWorks of the world, and all of this sort of stuff. This was ahead of all of that. So entrepreneurship really wasn't that sexy at that time, especially as a startup. Especially in university or college, it just really wasn't promoted, even around the school, as a viable career path. So I wanted to be a part of changing that. Again, in my little tiny industry, which was mass manufactured physical consumer products, I wanted to help those people really accelerate and become their own brands. And to me, that kind of shining light, that guiding star, was what helped me kind of avoid some of the naysayers and also become an industry pioneer. We created this whole category of design for manufacturing for startups. So to me, that was far more exciting than trying to just follow what all these 30, 40, 50-year-old industrial design firms have been doing that worked for them in the 80s, 90s, et cetera.
So now what was the process like, and how do you think, like, why do you think you made it work when everyone told you you're crazy and this idea is going to fail? Like, how did you get that to become profitable, sustainable, and create this long-term success that you've had?
Well, hard work and a bit of luck. The reality is that the industry did improve over time, as we all saw, right? Kickstarter and Indiegogo were huge promoters, and even look at things like Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. Now it's, especially now we look at 2024 years later, now it's amazing to be an entrepreneur and a startup, and it's promoted at all the schools. There's all kinds of funding options available for startups of every different type, not just hardware, all different types. There's multiple times more options for ultra early stage folks than ever before. So part of it was the vision of seeing that coming and believing that startups were going to be a large part of the future of product development. And nowadays it is very much a part of product development. Even big corporate, they're buying more and researching less themselves. So they just want to buy the next hot startup, as opposed to trying to figure it out with their management consultants as what the next hot product is going to be. Instead, they'll just buy them. So let the market figure it out. Let the startups figure it out. Once the startups get some traction, which means products being sold and customers being happy with those products, then things move on. So on one side, there's the vision for what's going to happen. On the other side was just determination and hard work. This wasn't an overnight success. So it took, I would argue, my entire 20s before I truly cracked the nut on how to figure this out. I started small, MVP, minimum viable product, part-time industrial designer, as I was saying earlier, focusing on really simple products. And we evolved. So year after year, we became more sophisticated. We learned from our mistakes. We added better team members. We started hiring from the top as opposed to hiring from the bottom. So eventually, a point where, as I was nearing my 30s, a few years into the business, unless a industrial designer, mechanical engineer, electronic engineer was considered one of the best, they won't make the cut here. They won't even make it in past the application phases, let alone getting a job here, let alone surviving the initial period of their initial work engagement. So those things all help to slowly and incrementally build the business around customer value, ensuring that we are always the best possible option, the most efficient route, and the most effective means of getting a sketch on a paper to a reliable and scalable manufacturing run. And with that as the shining star, everything else, year after year of perpetual improvement, started to fall very much in line over those periods of time and over that effort.
Attention manufacturers and e-commerce sellers. Is fulfillment a headache for you? Whether you're fulfilling in-house and you know you need to outsource, or you're with another 3PL, you know you deserve better service. Easy DC 3PL can help. We offer personal service, fast response time, and we're flexible to meet your unique needs. Get in touch today and find out how we can help you. Okay. So now through your 20s, right, where it was very, you're just barely getting by, grow, almost go broke, and repeat, like that type of cycle. Like, did you ever struggle with self-doubt and have those thoughts like, wow, what am I doing? I don't know if this is gonna make it. Like,
Oh, of
talk
course.
about that.
Of course, it's tough. You're never going to be sure, but that doesn't mean that it should ever reduce the effort that you're putting into the goal that you think is to be accomplished. If you truly believe in something and you're seeing market indications that you're on the right track, I think that's a key difference, right? You don't want to be blindly believing your own theory, especially if you're doing this for many years. Originally, you have to blindly believe in your theory because you don't have really any market traction with your business. But as you start to get traction, you're going to start to get one of the most valuable things on the planet to any business, and that's customer feedback. That is your golden resource to figure out what your business can evolve to be. So as we were growing, we were constantly listening to what customers were liking about what we're doing, what they were disliking about what we were doing. And of course, in addition to that, we're doing a tremendous amount of research on ensuring we're always up to speed with best practices, whether it's technology or design principles or design language, manufacturing partners, you name it. Always making sure you're trying your best to be best in class, but simultaneously, and most important, listening to your customers and what they really need, because that's going to differ from what you think is important. Now, not always, but often. And your customer is right, especially your best customers. And those are the people that you need to follow to figure out, okay, year after year, how am I getting more of my best customers? What do I need to do? What do I need to improve on across the board in this business to be better and better and better year after year? So even if you have that self doubt, there's no reason to lay off the throttle. I'm not a believer in that at all. I know it's controversial. I know a lot of people talk about, you need a certain amount of rest and readjustment and, pivot's okay and this and that. But I'm a strong believer of no matter what you're feeling inside, hold the pedal to the metal. And what you'll actually find is the reason you're feeling that anxiety uh, is not because of essentially a problem with your business model. It's a problem of inaction. So if you are solving the problems that you know are most important and are going towards that guiding light, those guiding principles, then you will not feel anxious. You will not feel nervous, or at least that will start reducing because you're accomplishing key goals and milestones that you know are most important, which is what, prioritization is so important in any business. If you keep focusing on those, then you'll notice the more you do that, magically, the less nervous you'll feel about the business.
Ah, okay. And so you mentioned too, you worked with close to 2,000 startups. So with that big of a sample size, what are some common lessons you've learned about what really makes startups successful?
Yeah, I'm going to talk more from a hardware perspective, but this does stretch to other businesses as well. I have really only had the privilege of working with mass manufactured physical consumer product startups. So that's really the only world I know. But through that, I've got to see a lot of what fails and what succeeds. And there's a few key things that I would say. And I'm going to put these in no particular order because I think they're all important. But let's start with number one. Number one, my opinion, especially with hardware startups, is don't take shortcuts. That is one of the key killers to any hardware business, arguably other business as well. We all know this whole concept that came largely through the software spaces. Just release whatever you can, get it to market, and then iterate. You don't have that luxury with hardware. And nor does it make a lot of sense really for building a brand. I would much rather that somebody starts with a great product than releases something that's mediocre, gets hit terribly in terms of reviews and brand value and all the rest, and then tries to crawl out of that hole. So take longer and put more effort into doing a great job as opposed to hoping that you will fix those problems and challenges down the road. Now, that segues into number two, which is focus on what I like to call smart minimum viable product. So we've all heard MVP before, but again, because of the software lens, I think that's been, especially in 2024, that's had an awkward lens thrown on it because, again, this whole concept of just release whatever you have to market is we are seeing really big downstream problems. Okay, so how do you release on a startup budget with limited time most of the time and potentially other limited resources as well? Well, how do you release a great product? The key there is less features for your first version, but of the fewer features you do an excellent job at those few features. Now, this again could be across any business, but if we look at hardware in specifically, if you're looking at a product, it is extremely easy, almost addictive for a hardware entrepreneur to want to put all of these bells and whistles into their first version of the product. They're trying to make it forward compatible and backwards compatible, multi-size, multi-region. It's got to pair with an app, all of these other things that may be useful one day for the growth of the business, but is absolutely going to hinder you and possibly sink the ship before you even have a chance to get your first version of a product to market. So typically as a hardware startup, you've come up with an idea off of like one or maybe two really key features or benefits to somebody. Look at those with laser focus and a very surgical approach and say, I'm going to release a first version of the product that accomplishes this task for a much smaller portion of my total addressable market. Go after that smaller market and do a really good job of your product. Great design, engineering, prototyping. You've vetted through your manufacturing process. You've done short run, leading into full scale manufacturing into cost down manufacturing, but on a much simpler product. A simpler product so that with the same dollars that you had, your upfront investment, whatever that is, you could do a world-class job of, let's say, two or three features, as opposed to doing a very mediocre job or possibly even a non-starter job of 10 features, as a rough example of numbers here. If you can focus on that and release something great to the market, that gets you wedged into the market, and then you can expand and grow from there. And this is very different than the way that big corporate does product development. And I teach both at the master's level, corporate product design and startup product design. And they're vastly different because a corporation is trying to do the everything to everybody thing. So if you research design best practices and so on, you're going to come up with all this information about what big corporate is trying to do, spending essentially millions or if not tens of millions of dollars on the next version of their product before they release it. Whereas you as a hardware startup can't possibly afford that depth, those resources, et cetera. So your job is to focus on something much smaller, crush it, do an incredible job, have all the people who want to buy that specific thing loving it, get all these 5-star reviews. Now you're off to the races as a world leading product.
Now, is that a conversation you frequently have to have when you're working with an inventor where they have this grandiose vision and they, like you said, they want to have all the features and you have to really talk them into reality of like, look, start with 2 or 3 and be excellent, and then that can be the launch pad to continue to grow?
Absolutely. Remember those two big things. Don't take shortcuts and simplify the product, which should make both of those work hand in hand. So as you simplify the product, it allows you to not take shortcuts on the delivery of that product. So if you focus on those two as a hardware startup, you're leading the pack. You're doing what 9 out of 10 of them don't naturally do out of the gate. Of course, at Mako Design, we work through all these things. It's not always a perfect science. Sometimes there are 3 or 4 features that must be on a product in order for it to, hit that, let's call it minimum viable product level to be a great product in the market. That's reasonable. As long as it's a very conscious decision of saying, I'm going to spend more to achieve these, as opposed to I'm just trying to be the everything to everyone product. That comes downstream. And interesting, because I'm talking about the product development side. Let's flip the switch and go to the sales side. So, on my podcast, the Product Startup Podcast, we talked to all these experts doing hundreds of millions of dollars in sales in a variety of different applications of product development and manufacturing, unanimously, the sales guys that are actually moving tens of millions plus in products say the simpler, more targeted, more basic a product is to start, the exponentially easier it is for them to sell because they can have an extremely targeted message using all of the amazing infrastructure that Facebook ads has, and as well as all the other platforms like Google ads and other more complicated stuff that's coming up. AI is finding those target individuals for advertisers. So the more targeted you are for a very specific niche within a niche within a niche of your target audience, the easier it is to say, hey, this is my exact audience. Find me everybody that is in this very small window. Here's my product, which perfectly matches it and is executed at a world class, and match these two people together. What does that mean? Lower return on ad spend. Lower return on ad spend means you're spending less dollars to acquire every new customer. That means it's an incredibly scalable model because you have a global marketplace. So even if you think, oh, only 1 out of every 1,000 potential buyers is going to buy this, well, in a global marketplace, that's totally okay. And that's your starter product. Most of the time, hardware startups, even software startups, or even services startups are surprised by how much business there is, even in the initial small starter niche that they go after. And that surprise tells them the market is much bigger, and they end up spending more time just trying to win that small market before they eventually develop out their version 2.0, their pro version, or their cheaper version, or the version with a bunch of bells and whistles or accessories for the product. All those things can happen downstream as long as you had a great starter product that you executed very well, and that small little group of your total addressable market loves it.
Interesting. Okay. Now, working with so many startups too, and seeing, helping all these different companies, what are some of your favorite success stories of the people that you've worked
Well, you know what? I get asked a lot about what like makes a great consumer product invention. And I would say, again, somewhat akin to what we're talking about in the show, simpler the better. So we have really cool products. Like if you look at Go Fish underwater fishing camera, I mean, that's an awesome product, right? It's a camera that goes underwater. You can watch the fish hit the lure. It connects with an app. Got all these bells and whistles, lots of features, beautiful little product. That's great. But you could imagine the development cost of something like that, as opposed to talk about Moonlight, which is just a little tiny plastic clip onto your cell phone. It uses your flashlight to project a story, kind of like those old viewfinder story finders, onto the ceiling of the roof of your house when you're telling your kids a bedtime story or something like that, right? It's just a little tiny clip-on device, uses the flash, and it's got this little flywheel with Dorley Explorer and other characters that you can go through, and it projects essentially this screen onto the roof. Well, as you can imagine, a relatively simple product. In fact, most of the prototyping we did was additive, so 3D printed prototypes, really simple to test and try out, really simple parting lines and such to go into manufacturing. They went to crowdfunding, raised $1 million on crowdfunding just for this very simple, very clean idea. From there, it's spun up and ended up selling tons of units all over the place. And within, I believe it was a year, Spin Master Toys bought them out. And within a year of that, they were in 70 countries. Really simple product. Right? So if you're thinking about your invention, again, even if it is complicated, we'll think of what's the simple version from an engineering perspective. It's a simpler version of my product that really does a good job of helping people. And you can grow that over time. That's okay. But think of your simple version. Or if you've got multiple product ideas, try starting with the easy one first. Like spend less money with your design firm on your first product to get used to how all of this works out. And as you learn the process, then maybe move on to your more complicated, more expensive development projects. Because again, hardware is an upfront thing. You cannot sacrifice quality. You cannot skip steps or try and shortcut things because you think you're going to outsmart engineering or manufacturing. You have to go through key steps to make a world-class product in production and producible and scalable at production as well. So all these things factor into meaning the simpler you can think of in terms of the engineering complexity, the exponentially more successful you're likely going to be on the other end trying to move that thing to market.
Okay. So now being 20 plus years in business and all the success, and I'm looking at your website too, and so many different awards and testimonials and all this type of stuff. So what's next for you? in terms of where you're trying to take Mako Design?
I appreciate you asking. You know what? I just want to do more of the same. We're in a really good spot. We're in 4 locations: Austin, San Francisco, Toronto, and Miami. So we're trying to be kind of coast to coast. So really anybody anywhere can be within either a drive or a short flight to one of our locations, even though most of it's not necessary these days. But, it is nice to meet face to face with clients as, if we can. And we just want to keep doing what we're doing. We've got a really strong model from not only design and engineering perspective, getting it to manufacturing. Obviously, that's the most important thing we do. That's what clients hire us for. But in addition, we also help with that education and handholding to guide somebody from that sketch on a napkin all the way through to not only production, but scaling production, which is the point where they kind of graduate from the Mako design nest, so to speak. But that's been really enjoyable putting together those processes. Basically, over the early days of COVID, we were reflecting a lot more inward than trying to grow outward. And we built in so many of these processes and systems to ensure that obviously design is going smoothly to production, but also that clients have the resources, the education, the assistance that they need to accelerate all of the other pieces of the product business as well. All with the singular goal, same goal from day one, is helping hardware startups from sketch to production, not just as a service, but also to ensure that their business as a hardware startup is a big success. And that's why we just want to continue doing more of that. Slow and steady wins the race, as we've always done. Every year we grow, but we don't try and do anything crazy. And I just really enjoy where we're at. So part of that is selfish, because I genuinely just enjoy the type of work that we're trying to do. Part of it is strategic, because we want to grow incrementally and we don't want to take big risks or big gambles that could potentially hurt a great infrastructure that's already in place.
Excellent. Okay. And if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about what your company does, what's the best way they can do that?
Sure. I mean, just go to Mako Design, Mako design.com. Feel free to add me to LinkedIn. Anybody who mentions this podcast, I'll happily add them back onto LinkedIn as well. But the website's the easiest place to find a bunch of resources. And of course, we've got the podcast, the Product Startup Podcast. So if you want to listen more very specific to hardware product development and selling of products, go there to check out more resources. But all in all, happy to help any hardware startups or scale-ups that are out there looking to really accelerate their consumer product development plan.
All right. And we'll link all that in the show notes as well for everyone.
Thanks,
All right.
David.
Well, Kevin, thanks so much for being here and taking the time. Really appreciate learning about your journey and all of this. And that's all the time we have for now. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, David. Much appreciated.